Hello, and welcome to Business Lessons from the Military. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we're here every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. I realize I'm sitting down. I'm gonna stand up because that's what I've been doing lately. There we go. Aha, excellent, much better. So I can talk much more freely now and wave my hands around a lot more. So welcome to the show. Glad you tuned in. And what we do here each Tuesday is we talk about military doctrine, military history, the leadership of great military leaders, and how we can use that in order to build our businesses, make them work better, whether we own the business ourselves, whether we're working for another company, or for that matter, it doesn't really have to be a business per se. It could be a nonprofit. It really even could be in academia or government. But business, I think, is the most obvious. Businesses and nonprofits are the most obvious places to apply these principles. So we've been working through Marine Corps doctrine as the basis for our discussion, and we're going to continue with that today. And especially because this is the military, you have to have a PowerPoint. I was in a meeting yesterday evening, and the person who was giving was talking about. He said there's only 8 slides. It's not death by PowerPoint. And it's like being right back in the military, because people used to talk about death by PowerPoint all the time. So here we go, business lessons from the military. And as I mention each week, what we do here on the Way to Wow shows is based on the 3 pillars of attainment, which is a system for helping us understand ourselves and our lives better, and see to it that we're dealing in all the various realms that we need to be involved in. We're dealing within the pursuits pillar and within the finances realm primarily, although today, especially, you're going to see we're going to be dealing with relationships as part of our discussion. So we talked about maneuver warfare and orienting on the enemy. And today we're going to talk about philosophy of command. Now, if you'd like to review these 2 topics and all the other ones, please feel free to go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/@the-way-to-wow show. And you can see past episodes. There's a playlist for business lessons from the military, as well as our other shows, which I'll mention at the end. Okay, so philosophy of command. Now, in the military, you'll oftentimes hear people talk about command versus leadership. And I think it's an interesting distinction that's made. So I'm going to talk specifically about the Navy and the Marine Corps, because I served in the Navy and I served with the Marines. I can't tell you for sure that the Air Force and the Army have this similar doctrine, but I suspect even if they don't have the doctrine, it operates in a fairly similar way. So in the Navy and Marine Corps, and well, in all the branches of the military, you basically have 3 categories of people. You have enlisted, you have warrant officers, and you have commissioned officers, which come in a variety of categories. So enlisted people are what used to be called the rank and file. They're the junior enlisted people do most of the work. The more senior enlisted people, which in the Marine Corps would be pretty much a sergeant and up, or even a corporal and up. In the Navy, it would be a 3rd-class petty officer up through a chief petty officer. So they do the work, but they also exercise leadership, in the sense that they're the frontline leaders leading the so-called troops. And then, and the warrant officers, so they're technical specialists, okay? and they have, I don't want to say it's an advisory function because it really depends on the type of warrant officer, but they're kind of in a middle ground between the senior enlisted and the commissioned officers. The commissioned officers exercise command. Now, many people in the military might take issue with that, the way I've broken that down. But if you talk to especially senior enlisted leadership, your non-commissioned officers. So in the Marine Corps, non-commissioned officers are corporals and sergeants, staff sergeant and above, things like staff sergeant, gunning. First, second, and third class petty officers are I've said a non-commissioned officer. Sorry, I went senior chief petty officer and master chief petty officer. Those are the senior non-commissioned officers. Now, some first class petty officers would say that they are an SM. Commissioned officers especially exercise that leadership role because they're leading the non-commissioned officers and there. Okay, the NCOs are doing more sort of supervision almost. Okay, although in the Marine Corps, they would tend to exercise more of a leadership function. The reason I talk about this is what we're dealing with here is the philosophy of command, not the philosophy of leadership. And those are not the same thing in the military. Okay, so command is a commissioned officer function. And so when we talk about the first principle of philosophy of command, decentralized, what we're talking about is pushing decision-making authority as low down the hierarchy as possible. Okay, now there's several reasons why that's beneficial. First of all, the person on the scene knows much more about what's actually happening, especially in a combat situation, than an officer who's, rear echelon or is, maybe they're at a command center or a FOB. Not a FOB. They're not at a FOB. They're like back at base or something like that. And so they don't have firsthand knowledge of what's going on in the battle space. Okay, so whatever they know about the battle space, they're either gaining by way of people who are in the battle space, who are passing the information back up the chain of command. I'm going like this, but like up the chain of command, or they're getting it from some other source. They may have drones that are surveilling the area or something like that. But no matter how good the drone surveillance is, and no matter how thorough frontline people are in pushing information up the chain of command, they still don't have the direct feel for the battle space and for all the issues that are going on, how chaotic it is, how ordered it is, the temper of the people, how dispersed the enemy may be in a much more defined way, etc. So by decentralizing command, we're empowering the people on the scene to make decisions because they have the best information and they have the best overall view of what's happening. That's number one. Number two, they can respond much more quickly. Okay, so they don't have to wait for information to go up the chain of command and then be analyzed and discussed and decisions made, and then the decision passed back down the chain of command. They don't have to wait for any of that. Okay, they can see what's going on the scene, and they can execute the mission and work toward achieving the objective most directly. Okay, so that's the first aspect of philosophy of command, is decentralized. And the same is true, by the way, for businesses. So if you think about a retail business, if an upset customer comes into a store, I mean, we would never think of, well, let's see, he's got to gather all the information. Maybe we have a drone flying around the store, right? We're going to send all that information at least up to the vice president of customer service to find out what we should. No, we would never do that. People wouldn't stand for it. It would take way too long, right? So we empower store managers to deal with that situation. But maybe what we need to do is empower frontline employees to make a decision, or a decision at least up to a certain, dollar level based on certain criteria that we set. And that way they can adjudicate a customer situation right there on the spot. Okay, that may, from a philosophy of command, sort of decision making, if you will, decentralizing it may be the best way to go for our business. That's number one. That's one reason, is because it may serve our customers or clients better. Number two, think about what it's like to be, and maybe you've been in this situation where you're an employee, you really feel like you can handle these things, but no, you're not permitted to. You've got to, bump it upstairs. How motivated are you to stay with that company? You're like aching for more authority, more ability to have an impact. And these days, especially young people, younger workers, younger people in the workplace, I guess is probably the best way to put it. They want to have impact. That's very important to them. Okay. So by decentralizing command, we empower them to really grasp and take an active part in our business. And that will marry them to the business much more closely. Okay. Now you say, well, they don't have the experience. They don't have the this, they don't have that. That's why we set certain boundaries. Okay. Here's the box within which you can work. And then if it goes outside of that, okay, then you need to go confer with your next echelon up supervisor. Okay. And that goes for the supervisor as well. Look, a store manager is not going to make a decision to close a store. I mean, to close it permanently. Okay. They're not going to do that. They may not even make a decision to close a store temporarily, even though it might be, absolutely warranted by the circumstances that the manager can see right there on the scene, right? So by empowering our employees, we are going to, or our coworkers, I guess is maybe a better way to put it, they're probably going to make some mistakes, but they're going to grow and become better people for our business over the long term. Okay, so that's decentralized. Okay, next, exploit human technology we use in battle, in preparing for supporting our combat readiness or whatever. It doesn't happen on a Henry Ford with the happen in a logical fashion. War unspools all of the human traits that we have. Okay, it's being guided by human beings. So with whether we're fighting a war or whether we're operating our businesses, we want to take advantage of, we want to exploit those human traits. We want to use them in order to advance our businesses. So these traits include boldness and initiative. There's no amount of technology that we can establish that can use boldness and initiative in the same way a human being can. Because the use of boldness and initiative, there's no way to plan when the right time is per se, because what we're doing is we're being opportunistic. We're looking at the whole overall situation. And we're saying, if we're in a battle, this is what Ukraine is doing right now in fighting Russia. They're probing Russian forces to find, where do we find a point of weakness? And when they find that weakness, bang, they're working to blow through it. Okay, that's exploiting a human trait. Okay, that's using their boldness and their initiative to take advantage of the fact that as humans, it's virtually impossible for us to be strong everywhere. Okay. Now, with respect to business, it's the same thing. We want to decentralize our command and then encourage our people, be bold, take initiative. Okay. So how that might play out in business, well, so let's say that we've got a junior employee who let's take a real estate business. Here's a good one. We'll take and you've got brand new real estate agent. He's newly minted license, shining it up there, right? And he happens to be I don't at a Starbucks, right? And he's getting his coffee, and he hears the person behind him talking to someone else about some real estate. What we want to do is we want to train him to be bold around and say, I couldn't help overhearing you're talking about real estate, blah, 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 and engage in that conversation with those people, right? Rather than say, gosh, I heard such and such talking about real estate. Oh, really? Did you happen to catch a name? Yeah, his name was, Bob Jones or whatever. Oh, well, let's track him down. No, too late. Okay. Engage with them right now. So we want to use boldness and initiative. We want to use our personalities in our business. Okay. Especially today, business is so competitive. We've got to be able to distinguish ourselves from our competitors. And we can do that through personality. Okay. I mean, one of the reasons why, it's like I have my Navy SEAL, not SEAL as in Navy SEALs, the Navy SEAL, the Department of Navy SEAL is back here, right? It distinguishes me from someone else you might be viewing. Now, you may not be able to tell what it is because I'm looking at this, it's only a teeny picture, but military people, when they see that, they know immediately what it is. And I connect with them immediately, right? I also keep the 3 pillars of attainment right over here because that's an integral part of everything that I do. Okay, so those are all coming from my personality. Now, a couple of others. Strength of will. Okay, there's no machine that can decide to continue even when the oil has drained out of its engine block if it's a car, or the electricity has been shut off. No machine is going to go, oh well, I have no electricity anymore, but I'm going to keep on going. No, that is a human trait. Okay, and most of us do not know just how great our potential is, how large our potential is. And just to digress, there's a great a friend of mine by the name of Andy Walsh, who's a human potential expert. We did a show with him now, gosh, going back a couple years ago, maybe almost 3 years ago, and this is when I was doing my more elaborate show. We cleared we cleared everything out of where we were shooting, and my colleague and I did an exercise with Andy where he showed us that our potential was greater than we thought it was. So I invite you to check out the episode with Andy Walsh. We all have much more potential than we think. And so we want to use that when the crunch comes, we can push ourselves to move forward when the machinery can't, because it doesn't have any more electricity. It ran out of gas. All the oil drained out and it seized up. Okay, those are the limitations of non-human actors. I'll call them. But human beings, we can push on even when it seems like we've got nothing left. We can dig deep down and keep going. That strength of will. Finally, imagination. Human beings can come up with solutions that didn't exist before. And I haven't read, frankly, a lot about AI and all of that, but from what I've seen of it and read about it, AI doesn't have the same kind of imagination that human beings do. AI can gather tons and tons of data and repackage it and according to what it's been designed to do, but it's not going to create something new, not in the sense of the way human beings do. Okay, so we want to use that imagination in our business. I was at a meeting last night and we were talking about how parents of the school children are too disengaged from what's happening with their children in school and perhaps with what's happening with their children in general. And they were talking about, how do we solve this? And they said, well, we need to get them to the school. And I said to them, rather than trying to get them to come to us, why don't we go to them? Why don't we go out where they want to be and interact with them there? So, for example, there's this cigar smoking club where I know the last time I was there, where there's probably like 200 people or more there, and people want to be there, right? So let's go there where people want to be, or let's do an event there where people want to be. And people looked at me like, wow, they never thought of that as a solution, right? And now I'm not immersed in the sort of running of schools and such. I'm looking at it from a different perspective. So I can take something from my world and repurpose it into their world and create something that they hadn't thought of before, right? AI, I don't know that AI could do that. Maybe it can, or maybe some future version of it can, okay? But we need to exploit the human trait of imagination in our organizations, in our business. Okay, next, we want to communicate implicitly, okay? Now, there's several aspects of this, and this is where relationships are most important, okay? First of all, we want to use well understood phrases, okay, so that we can communicate as quickly and efficiently as possible. Now, of course, the danger for that is if I don't know the other person well, I can say something to them and they can interpret it in a way that's very different than what I mean, okay? So what we want long-term relationships so that when we communicate, we can do it very efficiently and very effectively. Okay. Now, this may seem kind of counter to the way business is these days, where people don't seem to stay with organizations very long. And I think that's a shame, because high turnover is a real detriment to creating a truly creative, integrated organization. And so organizations, our businesses, nonprofits, whatever, should be working on creating the environment, the conditions where people will want to stay, will want to develop long-term relationships, will want to keep building, so that they can build really good communication and get to the point where they can even anticipate each other's needs. Okay. Now you can appreciate why in combat this would be so important. Combat is chaotic. And so we need to be able to communicate as quickly as possible, but be very clear about the communication and even anticipate needs. So if we've got two platoons that are converging on an objective, okay, if the two commanders of those platoons know each other well, okay, and they spoke beforehand about what they're going to do and what might go wrong or what might go right, etc., they're going to be able to anticipate each other's needs and be more successful in jointly achieving that objective. So the same thing goes in our businesses. If we have long-term, very solid, deep relationships with our people, we can develop that kind of implicit communication that will give us the opportunity to move more quickly, move more effectively toward our goals, okay? So we want to create that. And the communicate implicitly, you say favor long-term relationships. Okay. So how do we build long-term relationships? Now, I'm going to talk at this point purely from a warfighting doctrine perspective. There's lots of ways to build long-term relationships, but some of the ways that Marine Corps warfighting doctrine looks at it that are directly applicable to us as people in business and nonprofits, et cetera, is first of all, we want to talk directly to the other person as opposed to through messengers or intermediaries or whatever. Get that direct communication going. Okay. And this is most important when you find it difficult to deal with the other person, because we need to move beyond that situation, that conflict. It needs to be resolved, and it won't be resolved by communicating with other people or communicating through other people. It'll only be resolved by working directly with the other person and talking with that person, dealing with that person. So that's number one. Number two, it's best to communicate in person. Okay. We can talk over the phone, we can talk over Skype, we can talk over Zoom. Okay. And certainly in most cases, something like Zoom, where we can see the other person, is better than talking on the phone. Okay. But in person is the best, because when we communicate in person, we're not only understanding what the person is saying, we can comprehend how they're saying it, what their body language is saying, what the tone of their voice. Well, the tone of their voice we can hear, over the phone, but sort of the looks on their face and how that matches or not with the tone of their voice. Okay, so in essence, we want to immerse ourselves in the other person to get to know them as well as possible, right? There are people out there, they talk with a lot of energy all the time. It has nothing to do with whether they're upset or not upset or excited or not excited. That's just how they are, right? As opposed to if we're working together and I call you up and I'm like spewing a lot of energy at you, okay, something's up. Believe me, because most of the time I take a pretty even heel. Okay. I mean, I take it up a notch for doing my show to engage you. But if I call you up and say, look, do you have 5 minutes? I really want to talk to you about something. Okay. Or if we met in person, you would know that meant more than just, hey, do you have a few minutes so we can chat? That's different. Those are completely different. Okay. And so we want to communicate orally and in person as often as possible. Okay, and this gets to an issue that's going on right now, where so much work is office work anyway, is being done remotely, and companies are trying to bring, not all companies, but many companies are trying to get their people back into the office, right? And one of the reasons they're doing that is because they've realized that the ability to build relationships is much greater when we can interact face to face. We can mentor people better. Informal interactions can happen when we're in the office that just cannot happen when we're working remotely. We can have Skype meetings or all of that, but they're not going to happen informally. We're not going to pass someone in the hallway and because something's on our mind and maybe the person is senior to us, but we think they can give us some guidance, go, oh, excuse me, Jim, do you have a few minutes? I wanted to run something by you. That's not going to happen when we're working remotely. Okay. So for example, I have a friend who's a partner in one of the big accounting firms. They brought their people back in the office. I don't think it was 5 days a week. I think it was at least initially 3 days a week. But what they wanted was to bring back the informal interaction between their especially the senior partners and the more junior people who needed to learn from them, needed the mentorship that's necessary in order for the firm to best serve its clients and for the firm to grow. Okay. So you see, this is a philosophy of command. This is the way in which decisions should be made and the things that will support making the best decisions. So first of all, we want to decentralize the decision making, the command. We want to exploit human traits, okay? And part of the way we do that is by decentralizing and then being able to take advantage of traits like boldness, like taking the initiative, like the individual personalities, strength of will. Okay. Then we want to communicate implicitly. So we don't have to have elaborate policy documents and long emails or anything. We want to have direct conversations where the person we're communicating with can quickly understand what we're saying based on our using well understood phrases, based on us knowing each other and how we deal with certain things, certain issues or problems or whatever. And then finally, that will come through long-term solid relationships. Okay, so you can see all of this builds up to a philosophy of command that will empower more people in our organization to make decisions for the good of our organization and therefore be able to more quickly achieve our goals and objectives. All right, so that is what I have for today. I went a few minutes over. Gosh, this is such a great topic. I think we could talk for a long time. Go ahead and stop my sharing here. See, now you can see my my Navy thing better, right? Okay. So I thank you very much for joining me today. Really appreciate it. Tomorrow is my show, People Making. I think I have a guest tomorrow. I think Brett Henderson is going to be on the show tomorrow of strategic wealth and his perspectives on how he built a successful wealth management. Brett is a Marine Corps veteran. Next week, we start over again on Monday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific with Trusts and Estates Weekly. And then next week at this same time, 11 a.m. Pacific time, will be the next edition of Business Lessons from the Military. So I invite you to join with me for every show. And if you can't make a show, please